This is an astrology podcast for the time between the new moon on Saturday, December 4th, and the full moon on Saturday, December 18th, 2021. Hello, my name is Joshua, and we're going to talk about the energies that are shifting out or that are starting at the new moon on December 4th, and then reaching full illumination at the full moon on December 18th. The new moon represents a new impulse of energy that pervades throughout the whole solar system and reverberates around the rest of the planets and comes back to emanates through life itself. And the full moon is when that seed potential reaches its full illumination. So in the new moon chart, and we're right in the middle of that right now. So the new moon chart from last Friday, when we also had an eclipse, has a lot of juicy stuff in it. We've got, as you can see here, we're looking at the new moon chart. We've got so some of the main really interesting things are, we've got a Venus-Pluto conjunction right here. And the Venus-Pluto conjunction, Venus is just behind Pluto and has conjunct or is conjunct right now. And it's in a sextile over to Mars, which is interesting, we'll talk about in a minute, and sextile to Neptune. So you've got this harmonious, supportive relationship between, so Venus and Pluto in this balsamic relationship indicates that there is a letting go of values that no longer serve us. The values that no longer serve us are being alchemized and left by the wayside. While in that sextile, it looks like Mars is behind Pluto, since all the planets go this way around the zodiac. Even if they're in retrograde, they're still traveling the same distance or the same direction. They don't change direction, which is something we'll talk about down the road. And so while it looks like Mars and Neptune are only this far apart, Mars is actually all the way around the chart and to here. So it's in the waning hemicycle, or the waning half of the chart. So it's a meaning-oriented half. It's a reflective orienting half of the chart. Neptune is about a budding new cultural mind, is giving individuals the strength to confront and overcome worn out forms. And Mars supports us in making it personally meaningful. So what action are we willing to take? What new directions are we willing to launch out in? And those are all going to be individually decided. There's a really interesting, so this is a bowl shape. We got all these planets here collected on one side of the chart between Mars and Neptune. This is the north node of the moon, which is only a mathematical point. There's no gravity there. It represents the direction that our character is traveling, or the direction that we're going in Chinese astrology. They call the north node the dragon. And so the north node is the head of the dragon, and the south node is the tail of the dragon. And so the north node, direction that the dragon is going, is on the side of the bowl that's by itself. So while the south node is exactly opposite and in the second degree of Sagittarius, so right here between the Mars and the new moon conjunction. So it's almost like we just got a little bit of awareness of where we are no longer going. So we're getting a fresh, clear start, a fresh awareness of what? No, we're not doing that old stuff anymore. We're moving forward, which can kind of probably be triggering for a lot of people, because there has to be some level of unattachment. And I don't say detachment, I say unattachment, because it's not like we're detached. It's that we're practicing not being attached. So that new moon conjunction, and then with Mercury right in front of it, the mind is pretty activated right now, and we're being challenged to see objective transcendent values from the bigger picture, which is supported by Jupiter and Saturn both being in Aquarius, a sign that they're both very comfortable in. And Neptune still in Pisces, which is the sign that it is most comfortable in. And Neptune is the 9th planet out from the center of the solar system. And the sacred geometry of the number 9 is divisible by a square. So 3 squared becomes 9. And then it's also exponentially expandable through itself and through its subdivisions. So 9 is a really powerful number. And with Neptune being the 9th center from the center of the solar system, it corresponds to that number 9 in a strong way. And so that can, Neptune is the planet of metamorphosis and disillusionment, depending on which direction you go with it. So in its light form, Neptune helps metamorphosis happen. And in its shadow element, it results in disillusionment and illusions. Think the path of water finding its lowest level. Pisces is a water sign, and Neptune is very comfortable there. So we're thinking water finds its lowest level, and if its lowest level, think like the lowest. There's a saying that we rise to our level of preparation. So Neptune in Pisces with a trine to Jupiter or with a trine to Mars, and the two of them stabilizing the Venus-Pluto conjunction at the end of Capricorn, there's just a whole lot of power happening and a whole lot of reformulation of values on the individual level and on the cultural level, which is also corroborated by Uranus in Taurus, which calls for dynamic earth changes. Neptune or Uranus is the planet of discontinuity and sudden change and enlightenment. It's the planet of quickening. And when things quicken, when there's a flash of light and flash of awareness, we get to go do this now. It's a challenge to let go our old habits and move forward. Brings me to an important point. It is so hard to show up sometimes. It's been several months since my last podcast, and you're listening, I really appreciate it. And I just want to, man, it can be so hard to let go of old thought patterns and old mental habits, and lead ourselves forward, not necessarily looking for an external leader, but being the internal leader that we might be called to be. So this new moon chart really calls for, like I was saying, there's support, and it calls for the need to incorporate inspiring experiences and teachings into everyday living. Mars specifically supports the personal growth necessary to normalize the growth cultural transformations that are occurring throughout society. And Uranus in retrograde, as I was mentioning, with Saturn disseminating to Uranus, almost an exact waning square, compels us to redefine and to reimagine and redefine our limits in these cultural transformations. Saturn in the 10th degree of Aquarius calls for a self-reevaluation. So, and really kind of recognizing that the actors are not the characters in the play, and begs the question, who is someone really? In the context of Saturn, that might generate the question, what really are my limits, and what really are the rules of the new world that we're living into? We are, quote unquote, redefining confinement. So it's also really interesting that Saturn is the same exact number of degrees around from Uranus as Mars is to Jupiter. It's almost like our personally rising need for mental models is mirrored by the transformation occurring in the mind of consciousness itself, which I'll read that again. That's kind of intense. So it's almost like our personal rising need for mental models is mirrored by the mirrored by the transformation occurring in the minds of consciousness itself. The sun, if we look at the cycles and everything, all the planets move counterclockwise around the zodiac while the Earth's rotating, so it looks like they're moving clockwise on the over a few hours. Back on October 7th, the sun conjoined Mars. The sun moves faster than Mars around the zodiac, and now it's 19 degrees ahead of Mars. And so in this new moon moment, the impulse of energy that was released on the Sun-Mars conjunction back on October 7th can be symbolized by the Sabian symbol for Sagittarius 13 degrees, which reads, a widow's past brought to light. So what does that even mean? A widow's past brought to light. This is the new moon conjunction symbol again. So the keynote of that symbol is the karma of past actions as it affects opportunities presented by a new cycle. And what the widow's past is remains obscure, but the point is that even as the past cycle is closed, a phase of married life ends, the karma of whatever deeds or misdeeds this cycle witnessed will almost inevitably intrude into the new life period. Also, once a cycle of activity is concluded, much that was unclear or unconsciously motivated in the events it witnessed can now more easily come to the clear consciousness of the mind. It is possible to joyously herald the dawn from high above the actual stresses of existence, the preceding symbol, but the new day may be found loaded and darkened by the unfinished business of many a yesterday. This is the third symbol of the 51st fivefold sequence. Mankind is the widow, because our soon-to-be concluded Piscean age, which technically concluded in 2012, has buried most of the ideals it once revealed and proclaimed. Yet the new age will have to deal with many oppressive ghosts. This is a symbol of retribution. So I could add that this is a symbol of letting go of the past and getting honest with ourselves about the truth of what's happening in society. Not struggling or fighting for change, but just being aware so that you can make choices. So this is a seed of, so retribution seems to be about the truth of past successes and failures, trophies in some closets and skeletons in others. Notice the unfinished business of trophies and skeletons. What we're unaware of will act itself out without our awareness. What we are aware of can be consciously attended to. So I might add that we could soften and accept and create opportunities for compassion so that we can move forward with clarity. Wow. So that's been the last week. If you have been struggling to move forward with clarity, if you've been struggling to let go of old ways of being, don't worry, you're not alone. We're all going through stuff. And what is the rising action of this new moon bringing to us over these days, I guess you could say, over this last week and into the next week until the full moon next Saturday on December 18th, which is represented by this chart, which I just pulled up here. This is the chart for the full moon on December 18th, next Saturday. The location that you generate the chart for doesn't really matter because it's an Earth event. And so if the location doesn't matter that much, we're just getting the chart so that we can get the exact opposition of the sun and the moon. The houses don't matter all that much either. Well, actually, they don't matter at all for a chart where we're just looking at planetary aspects. So, and archetypal energies. So as we're looking at the full moon, a piece of background information that's like really important to point out is that the sun, so all the planets are traveling around the sun, and the sun and all of the other stars that we can see in the galaxy are traveling around the black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Okay, that's important because at the center, because the center of the Milky Way galaxy is at 27 degrees Sagittarius, which is exactly where the sun is right now, or at the full moon next week. So when you think about the center of the sun being at the center of the black hole, what that also means is that we're staring across the entire solar system. When we look at the sun at the day of the chart, or on the 18th here, next week, when you look at the sun, you'll be looking all the way across the entire galaxy. And when you're looking at the moon at the full moon next week, you're looking away from the center of the galaxy out into deep space. And since our solar system, the Milky Way, is at the outer edge of on the outer edge, looking away from the middle really quickly catapults you into deep space. And I don't want to throw science at it, but what I want to say about that is that how could the energies not be different? The contrasting energy between looking across the entire solar system, looking across the entire galaxy and the black hole, the center of it, or energy that emanates, we're at the edge of the galaxy. So out into deep space just has to be a completely different energy. And so that's one of the reasons I find astrology so super fascinating. But so a really interesting thing to point out here between these two charts is that at the new moon, the sun and the moon had only passed over Mars. And so the moon is going counterclockwise all the way around the chart between the new moon and the full moon, and ends up over here at 27 degrees of Gemini, while the sun only moves from 13 degrees Sagittarius over here to the 28th degree of Sagittarius. So the moon goes all the way around and conjuncts all of these planets. So after so there's been a lot of gravity and a lot of conflict and decisions and a lot of extra just heightened energy that we're right in the middle of here on the day that's the middle of between the new moon and the full moon. So I wonder if the moon is in Pisces right now. So if we're probably the moon's probably in this exact moment, probably somewhere between, somewhere getting there close, ready to conjunct Neptune, which we already talked about. So when we go over here to the full moon, we get the sun having conjuncted all these planets. And then for the next 2 weeks, it's just in space. It's just in space by itself, traveling around, aspecting all these planets. So things that happened in the first half of the lunar cycle will feel different than things that happened, or things that I guess are about to happen. So from the new moon conjunction, so the things that happen over the last week and this next week are going to feel different than things that happen after the full moon until the next new moon, because all just the space that the moon will be traveling through. So that's kind of a significant thing to point out about a chart, and doesn't really talk specifically about aspects and doesn't really talk specifically about points, but talks specifically about what does the big picture look like, which is not something I see a whole lot happening from astrologists since I see a lot of people being focused on this aspect or that aspect. So as we're looking at this full moon chart here coming out on happening next week, there's a really strong aspect between the sun, the moon, and Jupiter. And so the sun is the power that exudes throughout the solar system. The moon is the energy, is the light that reflects back into our consciousness and into our dark spaces that we see more clearly when we're alone by ourselves in the dark. And Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system and is the only planet in the solar system that gives off more energy than it receives from the sun, which is a really important scientific fact that has no mythology or folklore in it at all, but it's just science. So like, how does that impact the interpretation of our chart here? And I think a key word that corresponds to that simple, straightforward fact is benevolence. So how are we giving off more energy than we're accepting from other people? And so Jupiter receives, in the way that it's aspected, Jupiter receives strong support from both the sun and the moon, showing a capacity for awareness of what consolidates and expands and how to move with the metamorphoses that are happening throughout consciousness on Earth, because astrology is a Earth-based practice. And side note, it'll be really interesting once we start living on Mars, once humanity starts living on Mars, to redefine and recreate how astrology operates on Mars. So interesting stuff, just something to think about. The aspect between Mars and Jupiter is a tight square. And so we're in this phase after the waning square, the conflict of meaning, or the conflict of how to move forward with the information that we have, how to move forward with whatever changes are happening in life. It represents a crisis of understanding and an opportunity to redefine our lives and relate to life itself in a new way. Mars's placement is supporting a poised and wise approach to what actions to take and how to think about what life is anymore. Because like life, I don't know, everybody else's, life has changed a lot in the last several years, but there's still some things that haven't really changed that much. Venus will have transited Pluto by next week. Cultural values are becoming redefined. Venus will retrograde back over Pluto later in the month, and then it will move direct over Pluto in a few months. Thanks to Pam Gregory for citing those dates. And so that's a podcast that she did on YouTube. Mercury is much closer to Pluto now, representing a standoff between achievements and the power that they represent. Venus and Mercury are in aspects to Uranus, and Mercury is in a waning trine to Uranus, and Venus is in a waning square to Uranus. And so what that means to me is that we're learning what elements work for us and what elements don't work for us. And so we get to practice clarity and harvesting the nuggets that really help us move forward in life. This grouping of planets, the overall grouping at the full moon, is a bowl shape, just like the planet shape was at the whole picture was at the new moon. So we saw this bowl shape, except now the moon has gone all the way around and it's moving into space, and Mars is alone on the opposite side of the luminary's position is a Mars is alone on the opposite side of the luminary opposition from the rest of the planets. Mars is at Sagittarius 5 degrees. The Sabian symbol for Sagittarius 5 degrees reads that an old owl sits alone on the branch of a large tree. So what's developing is individualized action from a poised and wise approach to existence based on a clear perception of unconscious factors and their operation. So there's an awareness of what's not right in front of us, what's not straightforward, what's not obvious, what's unconscious. So this suggests trusting the awareness that arises in the space that opens up during this lunar phase. So again, the first half of the phase is a lot of conjunctions, and the second half of the phase is no conjunctions. So what you could take away from that is not necessarily anything specific that's going to happen, but the contrast in what's happening between the first half and the second half. And that might give someone who's paying attention an extra personal relationship to the flow of conscious and unconscious energies that emanate throughout the solar system. Because what happens through light, through energy, everything's connected. That's what I'm trying to say. So because of the full moon, so the moon and the sun are at opposition at the full moon, and the sun is on top of or right in front of the black hole at the center of the galaxy, the solar system, galaxy, and the moon is kind of at the edge facing outward. And the Sabian symbol for the 20th degree of Gemini, where the moon is at the new moon, at the full moon, so full illumination, reads, through bankruptcy, society gives to an overburdened individual the opportunity to begin again. So, wow, how are we going to be beginning again, personally and collectively, into the next several months? The keynote is a release from unbearable pressures, freeing one for new tasks. So, gosh, all the pressure that's been building up the last several months, talking about me personally, like, I got to do a podcast. And then like, I didn't do a podcast. And then it's like, what are we, this not only brings clarity of actions taken, it offers a challenge to perceive new directions. So what directions are opening up for you, listener? Feel free to comment if that's a thing that you'd like to do. You're welcome to do that. It'd be interesting to start interacting with listeners. And so I'd be grateful if you did, and no worries if you don't. So the keynote again is a release from unbearable pressures, freeing one for new tasks. And it goes on to say that this symbol can be easily misinterpreted. For while it obviously has a connotation of failure, it nevertheless depicts a particular state of the complex relationship of an individual to his community. The bankruptcy proceedings mentioned here should not be construed as referring to a fraudulent type of bankruptcy. At least in the United States, bankruptcy does not imply a moral condemnation. Rather, it means that the individual failure cannot be separated from the health of the community. The special nature of the whole is implied in the failure of the part to perform adequately under particularly harsh economic conditions. A society which enthrones the principle of ruthless competition must also develop mechanisms to exteriorize the principle of compassion. The latter was first emphasized by Northern Buddhism and soon after by Christianity. The concept of atonement is directly related to that of release from unbearable economic pressures in bankruptcy. This is the third stage in the 18th sequence of cyclic phases. In the first two stages, we have seen the emergence of a new consciousness based on leaving behind the externals of biopsychic living in its at least relatively wild and exuberant aspect. Here we have another kind of, quote, leaving behind, a keynote, liberation from the past, which is, wow, kind of thematically congruent, right? So we're really letting go of things that, not only are we letting go of things that haven't worked for us, we're kind of altogether letting go of the past and preparing ourselves for a whole new way of living, a whole new way of living together, a whole new way of social structures, whole new ways of, so back of this chart, things being illuminated, whole new ways of transforming how we move forward. Whole new ways of transforming organic activity and things we would just automatically do on our own. We just like, we're going to be seeing new things. We're going to be perceiving new ways of living. And the more we can free ourselves from those old habits and old ways of being, the more free we will be to be present in the future realities and more capable of fluid consciousness and empowered choice in moments of fluid consciousness. It's a lot to say. I can explain that more. If you want to hear more questions, please feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Another really interesting thing to say about this chart for the full moon is the midpoint of the bowl. So again, this is a bowl, and the midpoint includes all the planets between the outer edges. So the outer edge is the moon and Mars here, and so the midpoint is the 28th degree of Pisces. Just a few degrees away from an entirely new from the new beginning of the cycle in Aries. So one of the fundamentals, one of the framework basics is that Pisces to Aries. So Aries is the first sign and it goes all the way around to Pisces. And then when you get from the end of Pisces to Aries, you're starting kind of a new cycle. And sometimes it has more of an impact than other times, but in this particular chart, the midpoint of the outer edges of the bowl is the 20th degree of Pisces. And the Sabian symbol for the 20th degree of Pisces reads, a fertile garden under the full moon, which we're in, reveals a variety of full-grown vegetables. So what does that mean? The keynote of this symbol, which I'll read one more time, a fertile garden under the full moon reveals a variety of full-grown vegetables. A lot of fullness in that symbol. And just to reiterate one more time, the midpoint is the place where the energies are concentrated. So the midpoint is just a place of concentration. And this keynote implies the full satisfaction of the individual's basic needs. So, and furthermore, it encourages us to remain cognizant of the abundance in our lives rather than getting sucked into negative noticing. This encourages us to soften any hypervigilance aimed at all the confusing things going on across the world, all the technological changes, which are far and wide. There's new microchips being created that are not silicone, they're based in carbon. So it's I don't want to go into details, but it's really interesting, and the possibilities for what that looks like, for how the impacts will ripple through society. I really see sentience coming out of this. So technological sentience, and we're kind of right around the corner from that. If you look at the bigger picture, and like Tesla just mentioned recently the Model Pi phone, and the Model Pi phone will connect to Neuralink. And so Neuralink to your phone, to your car, and you'll be able to do things with your mind without having to use your body to do it. and manipulate big machinery. Like this stuff's like right around the corner, which is a completely new way of doing things. And it even showed that theme even shows up in the astrology, which is so interesting to me. And so let's zoom out from whatever situational chaos we might be experiencing in the moment, and see how we are players in a bigger picture. And so with that, I think that brings me to the end of the podcast. And I wanted to thank you for watching, and I hope you got some value from this. And please feel free to let me know or follow or et cetera, et cetera. Have a wonderful and blessed day. And I look forward to being back with you as soon as I can possibly emotionally handle it. Cheers. Bye.